What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel. This is a short video running through last night's statement that we got from Celtic in response to the questions raised by the Celtic fan base at large. Numerous fan groups, fan associations, outlets, hundreds of outlets signed an open letter to the club following the closure of the summer transfer window and the failings in Celtic's summer transfer business. They released a statement last night at 9 p.m. because when else would you release an important statement that's supposed to address numerous key issues raised by the wider fan base than 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. We're going to run through it. We're going to look at the content in it and see if it answered any of the questions. I'm sure if some of you have already read it, most of you will probably have seen it. It's about 1,000 words long. It's a lot of words to say next to absolutely nothing, but we'll go through it and we'll try and pick it apart and see if it actually addresses any of the concerns that have been raised by the Celtic support following this summer's transfer business and the wider issue of where Celtic is really going in terms of these cycles that keep coming to an end when we build up a position of strength and we can't seem to go any further. So let's take a look at it then. It begins by saying there was a meeting between the Celtic Supporters Association, the Federation of Celtic Supporters Clubs, and I think the Association of Irish Celtic Supporters Clubs as well. What it doesn't say is who was at the meeting from the Celtic point of view. Was it the board? Was it Michael Nixon? Was it Chris Mackay? Who was there? We don't know. I think the other thing, first of all, just to address is that people might say, well, we've asked for communication and we've got it, and you're still not happy. This is not communication in the way that the Celtic support is looking for. I don't think it's certainly not the kind of communication that I'm looking for. This is a nameless statement. It's a PR statement. Nobody's been brave enough from Celtic to put their name on it. It could have been written really by any PR department. And I think the lack of accountability and transparency there tells you a lot about the content of the statement as well. How are we supposed to have accountability and transparency when you get a statement like this that's not presented by anyone in particular? It's just the entire football club. So nobody's put their name on it. So we can't hold anybody accountable even for putting this statement together. We don't really know who it is that put it together, but that's another matter. The first couple of paragraphs are about on-field success, underpinning everything we do, general platitudes that you'd expect to open up a statement like this. But I want to pick it up where it says the transfer activity. You can see it on your screen now. Transfer activity attracts enormous attention and speculation, particularly across social media, and the mainstream media has commoditised the transfer window in its relentless search for content. Unfortunately, as is often the case in the media and social media, there is inaccurate or misleading information in circulation. So, straight off the bat, the first protocol for this statement is to suggest that what people have heard all summer is inaccurate and misleading, that nothing is actually wrong here. You've just been misled by the media. Again, there's no real, at this stage of the statement, there's no acknowledgement of any failings or any shortcomings in Celtic's transfer business. That there's no admission of really any fault at all. They're straight out the bat with, really, you've been lied to by the media, and on social media the reaction is totally out of proportion, not representative. It's misleading information and it's totally inaccurate. Okay, so it's clear from our meetings with the supporters representatives and from feedback in recent weeks that the supporters seek clarity. That's an important thing, seeking clarity, and we'll revisit that throughout this statement. We'd like to address several key points directly. Now, in my opinion, the remaining paragraphs in this statement, the key points that are these several key points that are directly addressed are justifying the club's failure in the transfer window by hiding behind UEFA's sustainability regulations, and again reiterating the fact that basically we don't really know what we're talking about because it's just misinformation in the media. That's the key points here, and again constantly labouring how good the financial model is and how they must never stray from the financial model. Again, I think the key concerns raised by the supporters are not about the model. They're not about the financial model. They're about the recruitment operation and how it runs and how inefficient it's been, its lack of ability to do timely business, its lack of ability to prepare for key games that shape Celtic's season and would further increase the financial footing of the club, like qualifying for the Champions League, 5 consecutive failures when we've had to qualify for the Champions League, most of them owing to a lack of preparation and a lack of timely transfer business. None of that is addressed in this statement, but we'll continue on. They're keen to point out that the club must adhere to its self-sustaining model. Now, nobody's under any illusions that the club adheres to its self-sustaining model. I would argue that's to a fault, okay? So what they're saying is it's about securing Celtic for generations to come. We understand that. These are the things we've heard for years and years and years. I want to pick it up in this paragraph that begins, further, the club's model is not optional. Now, I'm trying to be as fair as I can here, but I find that statement completely and utterly disingenuous. The club's model is not optional. So really they go on to say that the club's model is enforced because it's not optional. It must therefore be enforced by UEFA sustainability regulations. So therefore, every club in Europe must run and recruit players in the exact same manner, in the exact same model, in the exact same way, with the exact same efficiency that Celtic do, because UEFA enforces it through these regulations. It's not optional. Nothing about how Celtic does business is optional. I find that completely disingenuous. I think the wording there is atrocious. And so it continues, as they're essential as a consequence of UEFA's regulations, which we'll come back to in a minute, with which the club must comply. Wages and transfer spending are strictly governed by UEFA's regulations. Effectively, they cap wages and transfer spending as a proportion of our revenues. Now, this next bit is really important. Importantly, the club's cash reserves are not relevant to the assessment of this de facto spending cap for the purposes of the UEFA regulations. Now, once again, I find that statement baffling at best. The club's cash reserves are not relevant to the spending cap. Well, they were one-time revenues, so they were absolutely relevant. So they are cash reserves now because you've sat on your hands for years and done nothing with them. But they were revenue at one point, so they absolutely apply to the spending cap. And the spending cap is a very important point. So I want to now transfer to looking at Swiss Ramble's most recent analysis of Celtic's accounts and the last annual accounts Celtic released. We're covering the 23-24 year of accounts and if you like, the football season. So you can see on the screen now in the section about profitability and sustainability regulations, Swiss Ramble highlights UEFA have introduced new profitability and sustainability FFP regulations, which are less strict than the former regime. The maximum loss has doubled from €30 million to €60 million over the 3-year monitoring period. Now, that's not about the squad cost control measures, which I'll come back to in a minute. That's about the max loss that a club is allowed to make over a 3-year period. Now, of course, for Celtic, that is not an issue because Celtic runs at a huge profit, and in the last 3 years it has ran at a huge profit because it's been very, very inefficient in how it's managed its increased revenues over the last 3 to 4 years. And I want to bring this back up on your screen now because, as you can see circled below, there is a column of this table that pertains to the squad cost control. Now, from this season onwards, from 2025 onwards, the squad cost control is 70%. From 23, it was phased in. In 2023, it was 90%. In 2024, it was 80%. And then from 25 onwards, it's the 70%, which is going to be from here on. Now, that is the portion of revenues that can be used on wages and transfer fees to put together the Celtic squad, the staff, the manager, all of those costs. So in the 23-24 financial year that was covered in this Swiss Ramble article, you can see again on your screen that the squad cost ratio estimation was 43%. So you need to remember that in 22-23, where it was 37%, the allowance was 90% because they were just starting to phase in this rule. Now in 23-24, that dropped to 80%. Celtic were at 43%. And then from this season onwards, it's going to be 70%. But as you can see, that is well below UEFA's ultimate 70% target. Now, again, this is where I think it's clear that the club are really trying to just muddy the waters with this statement and hide behind the fact that UEFA has this and that that's really the fault here. We'll pick back up on some of the wording used in the next section of the statement in just a second, but it's clear they're trying to hide the problems with the recruitment operation behind these regulations. And to be honest, it's just not going to fly. I don't think it's going to fly with supporters. And yet again, they seem keen to point out that there's some sort of misrepresented opinion that exists on social media and not elsewhere. But I think they might find out otherwise when the football starts back again and fans can be in stadiums, in particular when it rolls around to Celtic's next home games as well. The thing that they neglect to add in the statement are any real metrics as to the UEFA squad cost controls. Again, that might be offering too much detail that would really show this excuse as the red flag that it probably is. The thing with transfer fees is that they are amortised, which means split up over the length of the contract term. So, for example, Sebastian Tunetke signs for 5.2 million quid. He signs a 5-year deal. That means that in this year's accounts, what goes in to this year's squad cost equation is £1.04 million. So on your screen now, you can see that Celtic paid a transfer fee for 5 players this summer. The rest were loan deals and free transfers. And the total amount of amortised transfer fees, because that's what goes towards this year's squad cost control equation, the total split across the contract terms for each of these players, the total comes to £2.64 million. Now, as you can see from the Swiss Ramble article, that's the most detailed piece of writing that we've really got to go on. It's a good piece of analysis in terms of football finances. You can see that Celtic are nowhere near the 70%. Now, we've yet to see what this year's accounts ends up at, but again, if you think back, I can hear that an argument might be, well, think about last summer. We spent 11 million quid on Arne Engels. We spent £9 million on Adam Ida, 5.5 million in Trusty. These sorts of things. Now, you've got to remember as well, Celtic bring in almost always in recent seasons a net profit from player trading. It's not even net zero spend. It's often or always net profit. Now, 11 million quid for Arne Engels over a 5-year contract means that in last year's squad cost control equation, about 2.5 million quid was contributed to for that year. So that's completely, again, I think it's misleading. It's interesting that Celtic want to point out the media and social media as points of difference in terms of misleading information and giving out inaccuracies, because I think Celtic's insistence in this statement of going back to the UEFA regulations is misleading, because the club is nowhere near these regulations. And I think the key thing for Celtic is it's run so prudently that even if we were anywhere near close, the years and years of really tight financial regulation would work in Celtic's favour if they were ever in any danger of breaching any of these regulations. In terms of the sustainability loss-making regulation, we are absolutely nowhere near that. That's allowed to be €60 million over a 3-year period. Celtic haven't made a loss for numerous years now, so we're nowhere near that. And as of the last published accounts, we're only just a wee bit above half of the 70% ratio. So you can talk about contract extensions, the contracts for the new players last season, which may well have increased that percentage. But what you have to remember is that Celtic have also made huge sums in player trading in that time as well, and the revenues have continued to increase. The revenue of around £120 million the previous financial year, it probably end up in that ballpark again for the next accounts to be published within the next couple of months. So again, it'll be laid bare, and I think this statement might not age very well when we see these equations come out in those accounts. But yet again, I just want to underline the fact that much of this statement is centred around those UEFA regulations, which I think is misleading, and I think it's evasive in terms of addressing the core issues that the support are concerned about. It doesn't address the failings in the recruitment operation, why the recruitment operation functions in the way it does. That's the key underpinnings of the fans' concerns. It's not really about the financial model. So I want to pick up the statement in the next paragraph where it says we can never compromise the financial integrity of the club. No one is asking Celtic to compromise the financial integrity of the club. Again, I think that's borderline disingenuous. Nobody's demanding that. In short, continues the statement, throwing money at transfers and contracts is not a sustainable route to success. Yet again, none of these questions that are presented by the supporters request or suggest that the club should be throwing money at transfer fees and at contracts. Nobody is asking Celtic to spend 50, 60 million pounds a season and absolutely take the club to the brink and just gamble all the resources the club has on a playing squad. Nobody is suggesting that. That's not the core issue here. The core issue is about a dysfunctional recruitment operation that can't get business done in a timely manner to meet Celtic's core objectives, i.e. qualify for the Champions League. So moving on to the next key bits of the statement, the club plans our recruitment and player trading strategy responsibly and consistently, ensuring the squad can be strengthened for the short, medium and long term. Now, straight on that point there, that is where they've failed this summer. The squad is not stronger for the short and medium term. There is no way you can look at the previous squad from last season or 1 or 2 seasons ago and say that right now it is stronger, while also seeking to ensure the development and progression of our academy players. Our objective is to create Champions League players. Now this, I take particular exception to this, because if that is the club's underlining strategy, if that is their main objective to create Champions League players through the academy, then they are abjectly failing in that department. Celtic in recent seasons, in recent years, has struggled to create Scottish Premiership players through the academy, let alone Champions League players. And I'm sure the club would argue that, well, that's because the top talent keeps getting stolen by clubs in English Premier League, and that is due to Brexit and how the regulations changed after Britain left the European Union, because now those EPL clubs with the huge resources have to cherry pick players from within the UK because they can't do it from European academies. And that is the case. We have watched that with numerous academy prospects leaving Celtic. But if that is the case and that's out with your control, you can't just continue to say our objective is to create Champions League players. You're not creating them and all the top talent gets stolen. So what are you going to do now? Doesn't that suggest that strategy should be looked at and reevaluated? Or are we just going to keep saying our objective is to create Champions League players? We're absolutely nowhere near creating Champions League players. The last one we produced from the academy that you could categorise as a Champions League player is Kieran Tierney. And when did he come through the youth academy? 10 years ago, 10 years ago. Since then, we've created next to nothing in terms of Champions League players. But that's an issue for another matter. And again, it's not something that was really raised as a huge concern in any of the fan questions, certainly an open letter that was signed by so many Celtic supporters, clubs and organisations and outlets. Moving on to the next paragraph about the recruitment process. So this is the only real discussion around the key problems that we would like to see addressed. Ultimately, once a player has been identified, confirmed by the football manager, and it is then supported by the board in line with the club's financial model, the club will pursue that target to seek to conclude the transfer within our agreed parameters. So again, twice in the same sentence there they've laboured when it's supported by the board in line with the financial model, it will then be concluded within the agreed parameters. So there's a lot of constraints there. Importantly, our ability to progress transfers is not conditional on Champions League qualification. Now, I just want to invert that sentence for a second, if you'll allow me. I think if you turn it around, importantly, Champions League qualification is conditional on the ability to progress transfers, and that's partly why we're not in the Champions League this season, and that's why we haven't been in numerous of these years where we've failed to navigate Champions League qualifiers. I don't know if what they're saying there is that they're sort of addressing this predominant train of thought that if Celtic win the Europa League, then there's a completely different list of players for the manager and for the recruitment department. We downsize and we spend less on transfer fees and wages if we drop into Europa League. That seems to be what they're getting at there. By saying our ability to progress transfers is not conditional on Champions League qualification. There was a long period of 3 to 4 weeks around like the period leading up to the Champions League qualifiers, and then shortly after, where we basically didn't sign any players. I think Simpson Pusey was the last one to come in before the Kairat qualifier, who by the way has taken absolutely no part for Celtic so far, and that was a loan deal. Before that, it was Yamada. There was 40 days passed before after Celtic's permanent signing of Yamada to the permanent signing of Balikwisha. So there's a long period of time in there in terms of its portion of the transfer window where nothing was being done in terms of deals. They do say we recognise the importance of timing, but it just doesn't make sense that it seems to be they are saying that there's a clear recruitment process, and then the club pursues a target within the parameters, within the agreed parameters, and within the club's financial model. So what was the downfall? What was the downfall of all these deals this summer? And they do go on to say that there's numerous factors we'll come back to in a minute. But again, it's about the misleading, inaccurate information that we read in the press coverage. So take for example, Jacob Broom, if we didn't bid for him and have multiple failed bids for him, even if you think that the go-ahead EO sporting director came out to sort of stir the pot in terms of the negotiations by feeding lines to the media against Celtic and the way they were handling their business, if those bids didn't go in, then what were we doing all summer? Because either they did go in or they didn't. And you'd think if a club was coming out or leaking information that Celtic had bid £2.6 million for this player and then a second bid of around £3 million, and Celtic had the impression that they were being a bit ridiculed by this misleading information that was getting leaked to the media, then Celtic could go to the media and say, listen, that's nonsense. We have not bid for that player. So one of them's got to be true, despite the fact that they want to divert all the attention away from themselves and onto the media and onto the UEFA regulations. What was happening in that 3 or 4 week period where Celtic needed reinforcements in order to try and qualify for the Champions League, but we were not securing any deals, we were not completing any deals within any parameters, let alone the agreed ones. There were no players coming in the key areas that we needed them, in the attacking areas of the pitch, in the wide positions or up front. There was nothing being done. There was no transfers being concluded. So if it's all just misleading information in the media, what was actually happening in that key period of the transfer window where we had to get business done? Who knows? Moving on then, the next bit I want to highlight here is there are many factors and challenges at play in the global transfer market. Here we go, with the excuses that we've heard before, many of which are out with the club's control, including the selling clubs seeking fees beyond our valuation. I don't think that would be hard, given that Celtic's valuation seems to be 50% or less of the selling club's valuation, or waiting until the end of the transfer window to seek the maximum price. That one's rich, or waiting until the end of the transfer window to seek the maximum price. Again, these factors that are at play in the global transfer market must mean that there's no club in European football that can get transfers done in a timely manner. That's what it's suggesting, because surely if Celtic can't control them, then no club can control them. Selling clubs seeking fees beyond our valuation. Now, this might seem a bit extreme, but Celtic's valuation of a player means very little in the realm of the selling club's valuation of the player, because the selling club owns the player, and whatever their valuation is, that's what will have to be met in order for a deal to be done. Yes, of course, there's negotiation to be had, but I think it's in those negotiations that Celtic have fell short this summer. I think that's clear. I think there's been numerous transfer targets that have been missed out on, and it can't all be misleading and inaccurate information from the media. That just cannot be the case. Um, and players choosing to join another club or requesting contractual terms we cannot responsibly meet within our financial model. Now, yet again, I don't expect every single player that Celtic are interested in to be easy to negotiate with. I don't expect their agents to be easy to negotiate with. But at the end of the day, at the end of a transfer window, you have results, and the results are shown in the strength of the squad, the number of players that you brought in, where and when you brought them in, both where in terms of their position. Was that the key area of the pitch that the manager needed strengthened to negotiate the key games? And when was it done in the transfer window? Was it done in time that these key objectives could be met? And that wasn't the case this summer, and it hasn't been the case in numerous other years. That's why people are fed up with the current setup, and they want change and they want answers. Now, a generic nameless statement like this completely avoids and evades everything that is being raised. It doesn't do anything to explain. Now, they don't have to go into the gory detail of every single negotiation they were in this summer, but it doesn't explain the failings of the current recruitment setup, and it does nothing in terms of taking any new steps to change it. Or what they go on to say is, and I think this is the only thing in the whole statement that pertains to addressing something in any way, and it's extremely vague. So the second last paragraph of the statement goes, "It follows, therefore, that much of what is written online or in the media about our transfer dealings is inaccurate." Again, as if there's nothing Celtic can do there to inform the media. They seem quite adept at informing the media about things when they're trying to brief against the manager, like they were the other day to the Scottish Sun, by the way. "We are exploring ways to seek to address the gap between speculation and reality once each transfer window closes in order to improve clarity for our supporters." Now, I don't know what that means. That's the only thing that pertains to even taking some sort of action here, and it's extremely vague. Like I say, I don't know how they do that, and I think at the end of the day, at the end of a transfer window, the reality that exists is the players you brought in, when you brought them in, and if they were brought in a timely enough manner for the squad to be prepared for the big games that it has to negotiate early in the season. They haven't been able to do that. Now, if you expect Celtic to actually action exploring ways to seek to address the gap between speculation and reality once each transfer window closes, you're a better person than me, because I don't know what that means. And it's certainly, again, miles away from answering any of the questions that were really put to the Celtic hierarchy, certainly through the open letter. Like, we're not asking for ways to bridge the gap between speculation and reality. We're asking for the reality to be different. We are asking for business to be done efficiently and to get players in to improve the squad in time for big games that Celtic have been unable to do for years. For years, 5 consecutive years, we have failed to negotiate Champions League qualifiers, to navigate Champions League qualifiers. So that comes back to a systemic failing. There is something in the Celtic recruitment operation that doesn't allow for business to be done and for the squad to be improved in time for Champions League qualifiers. And it's happened again and again and again. And it points to two places. Either the people who are handling the transfer negotiations are incapable of negotiating deals in a timely manner, or the club's parameters that they've rattled on about in this statement are too stringent and they are not fit for purpose in modern day European football for a club like Celtic. And if those parameters are put in place by Dermot Desmond, then that raises even bigger questions. Why is the 34% shareholder making all the key decisions about what the club can and can't spend in a transfer market? What qualification does he really have to do that? And why do the people on the board, if it's not their inability to negotiate transfers, be human shields for that strategy. There's something systemically wrong with the way that Celtic does recruitment in terms of trying to get set up to negotiate and navigate Champions League qualifiers. It happens again and again and again. It's cost the club hundreds of millions of pounds over the last 10 to 15 years. And if they're not willing to properly address it, it's going to keep happening. They end the statement by saying, "We hope this statement provides clarity about our transfer policy." It doesn't provide transparency. It doesn't provide clarity. It does not provide reassurance. If anything, it's added fuel to the flames for the supporters because it hasn't addressed any of the key issues. And if Celtic think that this is the type of communication, transparency, and accountability that the supporters expect, they are sadly mistaken. It is so far from that. I actually posted this on Twitter last night. The statement at best ignores the failings and at worst justifies them. It justifies them by deflecting the attention away to the media and social media and saying that any information that you've heard or read about Celtic's transfer negotiations this summer is just lies from the media, and it hides behind UEFA's regulations as a way to justify the penny pinching agreed parameters that the club have set up that clearly are not able to get deals done in a timely manner for Celtic to negotiate and navigate the key games that they have to. And in that fashion, Celtic have passed up Champions League qualification like they have done year after year after year under this setup, under this way of doing things in terms of recruitment. And this statement does absolutely nothing to address those concerns. That's enough for today. I think I've ranted for about half an hour. I wanted this to be... I'm sick talking about this. I'm sick having to sit here and talk about this. But that statement is nothing short of appalling. It does nothing to address the actual issues here. And like I say, if the club think that that's going to make the scrutiny and the attention go away, they're mistaken, because it's only going to add to it. That is it for today. Thank you for watching this video. Like it, give us your own thoughts on the statement below, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you.